Hi, welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre The Beast Crayton with my celebrity co-host from the new podcast, Jessica Javen Talk. Welcome to the show and co-hosting with me today.
I am so happy to be here, Andre. Thank you so much for having me.
A whole week of beautiful Indianapolis, Indiana. How you liking it?
Oh my, I'm loving it. This is the first time I'm in Indiana, and I am amazed, and I can't wait to explore more because we've been busy here.
Yeah, you've been busy doing the show. Tell me a little bit about the show and why a podcast. I know a lot of it is about transformation, but you know, one thing I do know that you shared with me, another reason that you wanted to do a show was you shared something with me I thought was profound. The weakest link. Explain that and how all that ties into your podcast about strength and development and transformation.
Um, as humans, we're always changing and learning, and we were made to learn. So we should not put limits.
Mm-hmm.
I did put limits on myself. I did think that I had a limit, and then I found out that I didn't. So that was a complete transformation that I never fathomed. And that's what I want to do with the podcast. I want to empower people to understand that the power that they have inside of them is far greater than any situation, circumstances, or condition.
That's deep. Premiering this spring.
Yes, this spring.
Produced by the iambeast Network. Make sure you guys follow it, subscribe, and like. I can't wait. I know it's gonna be an impact. I've seen the behind the scenes, so I know what's about to
There you
be
go.
in store. With that said, let's talk about our guest. She's been on before. I love the title of her book, Fix the Freaking Marriage. I don't call it freaking marriage, but out of respect for the name of the book, I call it what it is. And it was a very good podcast. And the reason it was good for several reasons. She allowed me to give my opinion. And that's because she's also a therapist. So she's not going to interrupt. She's going to listen to me, whether she likes it or not. And I like it.
Right.
But we got her coming back. And let me tell you the reason why I have her coming back. Because I'm going to be transparent. Jessica's going to be transparent. And we're going to really take you down another side of Fix the Freaking Marriage. Now, when I aired her episode, it was met with a lot of deep questions, concerns, and some people say you can't fix the freaking marriage. There's a lot of variables as it pertains to, because when you say fix the freaking marriage, you have to look at all the variables. And more importantly, man, I sound like a therapist. More importantly, do you have the skill set to fix the variables in order to fix the freaking marriage? Without further ado, I'd like to welcome the author herself of Fix the Freaking Marriage, Miss Jennifer Bellingrodt, to the show. Welcome, baby girl. How you doing?
Good. Thank you for having me and having me back. It's very exciting. I'm super excited to delve into the other side of personality related to marriage today. So let's go. Let's do it.
So let's do a recap for Jessica, my co-host, who didn't get a chance to see the episode. Let's go back and tell the viewers a little bit about Jennifer, and we'll talk a little bit about the book, and then we'll get into the other side of the mental health issues of fixing a marriage, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Sure. So I'm Jennifer Bellingrodt. I'm a licensed psychologist of over 20 years. I wrote a book called Fix Your Freaking Marriage, Practical Tips to Just Start Somewhere. And that was in response to being married for over 20 years and everything that I've learned in the process that we talked about in our previous podcast. And then also working with couples for over 20 years and looking at what the challenges tend to be. And the main challenge, the main focus of the book is on immaturity. So getting from the marriage you have to the marriage of your dreams is only as wide as your immaturity. When any two people can get along. So when two people don't get along, it has to do with immaturity on one or both parts. And that the sources of that, the causes of that, the manifestations of that, it's a whole discussion unto itself, but it's all detailed in the book as we look at where that comes from and how to fix it. And then there are also some chapters, which I think is our path today, about challenging personalities in marriage and how that kind of shakes things up, if you will.
Okay. With that said, I'm a recap a little bit and use your expertise here. You deal with couples, and that's a strong title. Let's get real. I know you've heard this. Fix the freaking marriage. That's part of who you are. It's your occupation. You want to fix things, but not all things can be fixed. So, what are the three things that you find as common grounds as it pertains to couple? Me and Jessica was talking about this yesterday. It's funny that you're on the show today because we was talking about this, and she brought to my attention communication. And I'm gonna let Jessica explain why she said communication is pretty much a foundation of a relationship.
Yeah, I'm a believer that this is probably one of the biggest issues in the world in every different level of relationship and capacity, politics, whatever you want to go to. It's communication.
So, with that said, what are the three things that you deal with most that that affects relationships and marriage?
So I think the main thing is immaturity. So understanding why you behave the way you do, understanding your behavior, your strengths, your weaknesses. It's very difficult to change your personal narrative if you don't even understand how it was written in the first place. So having people individually come in to do the work of an extensive clinical intake interview process, learn their baggage, because we all have it, figure out why they respond to things the way they do, what are their triggers, where are these coming from. So I think overcoming that immaturity by getting a handle on where it comes from is crucial. Another piece is the communication piece. I agree with that. So the challenge is making a concerted effort to communicate, but more importantly, to do it well. Because we can communicate all day long, right? I can talk with my partner and I can be ugly and I can curse him out and I can do this and that and the other, and he can respond defensively, and we're off to the races. So making sure that you are communicating again from a place of maturity and security in the relationship. The third piece I would say would be just constantly being mindful that your partner has good intentions. If you don't believe that your partner generally has good intentions and has your best interests at heart, that's problem number one. You got to fix that. So what happens is when we recognize that intentions are good, we can hold a positive image of our spouse in our minds. That's how couples last, is they hold that positive image. They believe that their partner has good intentions. Now, they may screw it up sometimes, but the goal is to understand that it's not malicious. So if I mess up or I approach my partner in an inappropriate way, or I'm grumpy because of whatever hormones that week, whatever, if he believes that I have good intentions, he's going to still listen to what I'm saying, and we're going to have a communication about that. He can set a boundary with me and I can course correct, and then we can proceed. But just being mindful that your partner has good intentions, that's like a safety net, so that when your partner does screw up, it doesn't wreck the situation, the conversation, the relationship. It's like making all of these deposits into the emotional bank account. And then when there has to be a withdrawal because somebody's having a hard time, it doesn't wreck things. I'd say those are the three things that just come to mind automatically.
Let me go deeper with that. And I think we talked about this a little bit. When you talk about marriage, you're talking about the ages of, I'm going to be hypothetical here, 18 and then up. But let's go back a little bit. Looking at my situation, we're not taught growing up emotional stability, and we're really not taught communication. So you go into these marriages trying to fix the unfixable when we don't recognize that we need to be fixed. So where I'm going with this is, from a therapist standpoint, fix the freaking marriage. How can you really fix a situation with yourself when you can't recognize self? You can't recognize the childhood traumas, or you don't identify childhood traumas. And how many people go into relationships knowing that there's something emotionally or physically or mentally messed up with them, and the other person is forced to not only deal with that. This is leading into where we're talking about with the next topic. Uh, He or she has their own, like you said, baggage, which I call emotional childhood trauma issues. From as a therapist who deals with this, why is this such a major impact in the downfalls of marriage? Because we talked about this, and I told you I don't believe finances have anything to do. Number one, let me rephrase it. I know it has something to do with it, but back in the day, people would always say your marriage broke up because of money. Both individuals can make money. I think it has to do with, like you said, immaturity, but I also think it has a lot to do with communication. But more importantly, I think it has a lot to do with our childhood traumas, and both people not recognizing that they have trauma that's never been issued, it never's been dealt with. What's your take on that?
So I think that's crucial. Absolutely. I think sometimes people, you have to have that modicum of insight to be able to say, hey, you know what? I'm the common denominator in all of my failed relationships. I'm also the common denominator in all of my successful relationships.
Mhm.
So what's driving that? What are the strengths and weaknesses? Let me get some therapy to buttress those weaknesses, to, discern what they are, to fix them, to make changes around that. And I think it's just a matter of recognizing, being mature enough to recognize that sometimes we're just in our own damn way. And that's actually the title, part of the title of my second book is getting out of your own damn way and getting on with your freaking life. Because there are these self-limiting beliefs that come from our early experiences, our core beliefs, trauma, and everything else that might happen to a person as they're growing up. It builds that narrative. So I think that it's really just being open to the idea that nobody's perfect. And if you want this relationship to go well, it probably would be a good idea, if it's getting really serious, to maybe look at some premarital work. The book, Fix Your Freaking Marriage, actually can be a primer for premarital therapy, because it's this idea of, here are the things to be mindful of, here's what to look for, here's what to do, here's what not to do, here's how to do the things the right way, and make sure you're going into this relationship with your eyes wide open. So I think the challenge is, to your point, people have to have just that little bit of insight. They have to be willing to say, like, hey, I'm not perfect, I'm grown up enough to recognize that I might be contributing to the challenges in a given relationship. And you're not necessarily going to know that at the outset, but I will say, I think a course of therapy before you go into a relationship is good, because water seeks its own level. So the healthier you are, the healthier the people you're going to draw to you and allow in your realm. So I think everyone should do therapy. Obviously, I'm a little biased, but I think that experience, that learning experience, is huge. So you can go in with eyes wide open, you know what your strengths and weaknesses are.
So that's, you got a question, Jessica, before I move on?
No, I love what she just said.
With that said, let's move forward and get into part two of the mental aspect of a marriage, and as it pertains to fix the freaking marriage. I'm gonna use I've never been married, so I'm not coming at it from a marital standpoint, but I'm coming at it from a relationship that would appear to be marital, because it's years of investments. We're not talking about 2 years, we're talking about years of investment. What happens when you get into a relationship and you find deep seated mental issues such as bipolar personality disorder, narcissistic personality, uh,
Emotional dependence.
emotional dependence? What happens when all of these, what's the other word we use? What was the word we was talking about, Jennifer? Multi-personality disorders.
Oh,
When these
borderline personality.
borderline personality. I mean, I was not, first of all, I had never heard these terms used before. So when it was brought to me, there was a deep compassion in my heart because you're talking about someone that you're in a relationship with. You got to first look at that. I wasn't aware of the power of therapy, and I agree with that. That was a main life-saving support for me because now I had to put myself in a position to be educated with these things because the most, and we talked about this, most people don't realize they have these issues. And when you have these particular things, I'm not a doctor nor am I playing one, but a lot of people that have these things will say they don't have it because they're not even recognized to them what they have. You're here to talk about that and its effect on relationships, and more importantly, how do you deal with it? And then I can share with you how I dealt with it, but you're the expert here. How does that affect the relationship moving forward as it pertains to fix the freaking marriage?
So I think, our souls have a tendency to seek out what we think is going to complete us, what's going to make us whole. Not that we're not whole individually and we're, fine by ourselves, but we're looking for, that partnership. So what's going to give us that best partnership? Now, the problem is if you don't have your issues squared away, you're going to be looking for a partner who helps you work out those issues. And the really big problem is this is not generally conscious. It's these subconscious processes that draw us to certain people. And that's why part of overcoming
What do you
that
mean by
and
that? Go
and
back
getting
a
a
little
healthy
bit.
relationship.
Didn't mean to cut you off. Go back and explain that in more detail because that that really hit core here. So what do you mean when you say that?
The subconscious processes.
Yeah.
Well, so as we grow up, we develop these core beliefs about ourselves and the world and ourselves in the world and in relationship.
Hmm.
And those core beliefs, the negative core beliefs they turn into self-limiting beliefs. Those self-limiting beliefs drive our unconscious behavior or our behavior. So it's an unconscious process. So there's fear of failure, there's fear of success, there's all sorts of, I talk about 7 self-limiting beliefs in the training that I do on this. And the idea is that those core beliefs are driving your behavior. And if you don't know it and you can't get out of your own dang way, then your soul is going to seek a partner who helps you work that out. In psychology, it's called recapitulation and mastery, which is a fancy way of saying sometimes we have a tendency to marry our parents. The
Mm.
idea is that, right, if I have a relationship, let's say I'm a female, so I'll look at my relationship with my dad. If I have a relationship with my dad that was incredible and amazing or terrible and awful, I may seek someone who gives me that again, because that's my first male relationship model. So I may look for someone who's just as wonderful, and I expect someone to be just like my dad in that way.
Mm.
Or I'm going to recapitulate the situation with my dad where it was a negative thing, whatever, in this second example, and I'm going to try to master that. So I'm going to try to work my issues out with this person. And it's so hard because it's subconscious. You don't even realize you're doing it. So that's why I say the soul is seeking it out.
What
So
happens?
that's what I mean about the pairing up,
What
how
happens?
that happens.
What happens when the individual doesn't have either parent or one or the other as it relates to moving forward in adulthood to relationships? What if you don't have a mom? What if your mom was lost at a young age? What if you don't have a father? Your father was lost at a young age. How does that resonate in with what you're talking about as well?
So that's a great question because not everybody is raised by 2 parents, right? So for instance, if you don't have a mother, sometimes what happens is you will, I mean, it could be a number of different things, but a lot of times what happens is the child, male or female, will take on a lot of masculine energy. They don't have that feminine energy influence. So they may have a lot of masculine energy, and they don't have the more nurturing or caregiving side to their personality.
Mhm.
When you look at relationships, what happens is a lot of times people will, so let's look at a guy who didn't have a mother figure, or she was, a terrible mother figure, whatever. A lot of times that person will look for a partner whom they think embodies what a mother should look like.
Mm.
So if we typically, stereotypically, think of mothers as being nurturers or caregivers, sources of support, encouragement, they might, if they didn't have that growing up, if dad wasn't able to provide that for them, or there weren't females in their lives who provided that, they might seek someone who has those characteristics that they're looking for, even though they never had it. So they have, we have these ideas in our mind about what a dad is supposed to be, what a mom is supposed to be. And so they will sometimes seek what they think they were missing or missed as a child.
What you got to say on that?
No, I'm really going far with my thoughts here. I was I I truly I think I really understand, and it makes sense the way that we develop. And I was thinking back about how my parents were, and in a way, I believe that maybe I was going to be too picky with finding a partner, because I had my dad was amazing. I had a wonderful childhood. So then I thought that my standards were going to be too high, and what happened to me is that I lowered my standards because I thought that they were impossible to be reached.
Yeah,
That is
yeah.
that common, Doctor? What she just said.
I don't think it's uncommon. I don't know how common it is versus, someone pursuing someone who also has those high standards. But I think that's a really mature realization, I think, to, for being young and going into relationships that, gosh, I had this really great male marital relationship role model, and maybe I shouldn't, aspire to that. Like having that awareness to say, this could cause some problems. And so maybe I should lower my standards. Not that it's a good thing, right? Because you should have high standards and you should be picky. But yeah, it can absolutely manifest that way. People think that, they have their parent on a pedestal, so they seek someone who's, less than or lower ranked, if you will, than that, because they think that's the best they can do, or they think that that's what they should aspire to because the role model was unrealistic. So I could definitely see that, yeah, happening.
Let's talk about the effects of, like we said, the borderline personality disorders and all these mental aspects. Let's start with the borderline personality disorder and its effect and as it relates to relationship. What's your take on that, and how widespread is that? Because now I'm starting to hear that word like crazy as it relates to relationships. What's your take on that? And is there a way to fix the freaking marriage if that's in your marriage?
Yeah, so to answer that question first, there is a way to fix it. I mean, I've been treating borderline personality disorder, BPD, for over 20 years. And, it's said that there's no cure for it, but I've seen people come as close to a cure as possible without calling it that technically. So it is possible. The trick is the awareness. And let me give a little bit of information about BPD for people who aren't necessarily familiar with that. So there are a number of different personality disorders. They fall into different clusters. Borderline personality disorder is the kind of personality disorder that someone develops out of largely out of trauma, but there are some other reasons, genetics and brain chemistry and things like that, that can drive it. Most people with BPD develop it as a function of trauma that they've been through, particularly when they were younger. And so what happens is, with that trauma, especially sexual trauma, is, very detrimental, obviously. They become confused about where they end and the next person begins. So the issue becomes one of boundaries. And the primary coaching and therapy for BPD is around boundaries and understanding the differentiation between the people. So people with BPD are going to struggle with emotional lability, so controlling their emotions. They react to things versus respond. They struggle with mindfulness, which is one of the first things that we do in treating it. So they're very emotionally reactive. They're easily triggered. They're easily defensive because of what happened to them and the core beliefs that came out of that. So they struggle with emotional reactivity. They a lot of times struggle with abandonment issues, a strong fear of abandonment or rejection or neglect. They struggle with understanding that what we call emotional permanence. So, meaning that you can be in a relationship with someone, and just because they're not constantly feeding you some sort of validation or presence or whatever, it doesn't mean they don't love you. So that kind of links up with the abandonment stuff. But the main thing is emotional reactivity. Now, that's not like something big happens in your life and it's traumatic and you have a big reaction, right? Trauma is going to get a big reaction out of most of us. This is a consistent pattern of responding, reacting in a way that's detrimental to your emotional functioning and your relationships with other people.
You
So
saying
that's the gist of it.
you saying that is treatable?
Highly treatable. Yeah, I do it every day.
Let's move.
Highly treatable.
That's okay. Let me stick with that part first. If you're dealing with fix the freaking marriage, and your partner has um, bipolar personality disorder, how do you teach the spouse or the female, if it's a male, how to deal with that? And the reason why I'm saying that, because, like I said, I dealt with that. And one thing that my therapist taught me was, I said, don't give me a lot of food because I'm not going to digest it. Tell me first, what do I need to do? What are the tools I need? I had to understand what abandonment issues were and how to deal with those, how to address it, how to deal with validation, all these different things that you're talking about. But here's where I'm going with that. That was a lot of stuff on my plate. And I didn't know if I was emotional. Now I got to deal with my own shit too. You know, as a therapist, I have my own shit. So I had to ask myself, am I capable to deal with that shit? Does that make any sense?
Oh, it's making sense because I'm thinking now, me in my 30s, with my husband, and we're starting like as more mature adults, try to find ourselves, try to, understand where we're coming from, our traumas, and dealing with that as an adult now that we didn't realize before because we were too young. And we have 4 children and now we have to help them. So it's a lot.
So how do you do that, and what do you recommend? Because your book is Fix the Freaking Marriage. You're coming out with another part, but the bottom line is, how do you convince the other person to take that responsibility and that load? Because this is, I hate to say it, you got to go to school to learn this shit.
Mhm. So let me first make a distinction between bipolar disorder and borderline personality disorder. I won't get into the weeds with it too much, but they're two very different things. So bipolar disorder is not a personality disorder, it's a mood disorder.
Mhm.
So it means that your mood is dysregulated. Sometimes you're up and sometimes you're down. Now, what's tricky is with BPD, borderline personality disorder, there are also ups and downs. Those ups and downs in a personality disorder can happen very quickly. So it can be within minutes, within seconds, within hours, within a day. With bipolar disorder, you're looking at periods of days, weeks, or even months of someone being in a particular mood state. So that's the difference. And I've done some videos and stuff on that because it's a common misconception. Again, what's tricky is that both of them involve ups and downs with emotions. So when it comes to BPD, the personality disorder, the best thing for the partner to do is to get their own treatment and to get really well versed in setting boundaries.
Hmm.
So working to build emotional permanence and helping your partner to understand, look, just because I'm not in front of you doesn't mean I don't care about you. I don't love you. I'm not thinking about you. I'm not looking forward to seeing you. You get to set those boundaries. For example, if your partner with BPD is blowing up your phone while you're at work, you're trying to do your job, you're trying to pay your bills, you get to set boundaries in the face of that. And that's going to help them build that emotional permanence. So boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. That's what I would be coaching the partner on, largely. That'd be the first thing.
What if they are diagnosed with both of them?
So that
Oh,
happens.
that a double
I don't know.
shotgun. I call that a double shotgun.
Right. I don't know the exact data on how frequently that occurs,
Mhm.
but it does occur. I have a couple of patients right now who are diagnosed with both. So it is a double whammy. I mean, it's challenging because you've got two conditions that are driving emotions to go up and down. So for the bipolar disorder piece, that mood disorder piece,
Yeah.
there are a lot of things that you can do. There are therapies that can be done. There's dietary programs that can help with that. And then there's medication that helps level out the brain chemistry that's driving the bipolar disorder. So a lot of that, what I see is a lot of people do better with bipolar disorder with chemical regulation, like medication or supplements, things like that. With BPD, the personality disorder, what's interesting is some of the medications, like the mood stabilizers
Mhm.
that work well for bipolar disorder, also help with BPD.
Mm.
And some of that is, brain chemistry related and so forth. But BPD responds really well to therapy because you're reprogramming, you're teaching people that they don't have to react. They can learn to be mindful for just a brief second and then respond instead of react.
Let
So
me
I see more benefit of therapy for BPD.
let me ask you.
Not than medication, but with bipolar disorder, therapy doesn't work as well, I feel like.
Okay. Let me ask a question on that. I know the listeners are paying close attention, but my question is, what are some signs that and the reason why I'm saying this, I remember I shared this with you. I didn't know the signs. Well, let me take it back. I saw the signs. I didn't know what they were until it was brought to my attention. So for the viewers that are listening and you're in a relationship, what are some of the key things that will surface if your partner is demonstrating either one of these particular categories? What are some of the things that they may see happen frequently in their relationship?
So I think the challenges with emotional reactivity would be the big thing. And when you're working with someone who's a partner to someone with BPD, you do have to build some compassion. If they want to stay in the relationship and they're invested, they have to understand the disorder. They have to build compassion because it's going to be a long haul. BPD is not treated quickly. It's a long haul. Excuse me. So you build that compassion and then you help them understand what's going on. So you're going to see a lot of emotional reactivity in your partner with BPD. Here's what happens. Some of them become like obsessed with you. They want to spend every waking minute with you. They're blowing up your phone when you're not around. These are kind of extreme. This is hyperbole to make a point. Not every person with BPD looks this way. But if you see some of these cues and clues, they're very quick to anger. They're very quick to be defensive and have a big reaction. They're almost obsessed with you and constantly seeking you out when you're not in front of them. Those are some of the things that just come to mind that you might see immediately. And it's tricky because who doesn't love that in the beginning of a relationship, right? Like obsession is obviously too much, but who doesn't love someone who's really invested in like, hey babe, what are you doing? Oh, I can't wait for tonight. How's it going? Let's go do this thing to have fun, or let's go do this. Like we like that attention and that validation, and it drives our connection. So a lot of times people just kind of look past it.
Mhm.
And what's really interesting, I'm going to pivot just a little bit. What's really interesting is a lot of people with BPD will end up with partners who have NPD, narcissistic personality disorder.
Hold that, because we was
And
getting ready, that's where we're going to shift to next.
okay,
I'm
okay,
way ahead of you, baby girl. way,
okay,
way
okay.
ahead of you. Let's venture into that world, because we hear that word so much, and I think it. I'm gonna just say it like it is. If you've been around it, you can easily tell if somebody has, because we all have a narcissistic side to us, and I tell people that all the time. But it can get to the point that the people that really have it, it can be a very, very dangerous situation to be in when they have it. Let's dive into that a little bit as it relates to fix the freaking marriage, and you're dealing with somebody who has. This is a two-part question. Look, Jens, you know where I'm going with this. It's one thing when you've been diagnosed with it. We'll talk about that, and then we're going to talk about when you've been diagnosed with all three, and how do you deal with that, and the outcome is some of the outcomes that can happen dealing with a person or being in a marriage or relationship with someone that has all of these things, and is it treatable? Go ahead, Doc. Take it from here. Talk about narcissism.
So for some clarification first, narcissistic personality disorder is a personality configuration where someone ultimately has a very fragile and small ego. Now, you wouldn't know it on the surface because most narcissists are blustering and mustering, and they want everybody to know that they're the greatest thing since pockets on shirts. And there's this like overconfidence, cockiness, arrogance. Like they look like just these super confident people. But if I'm truly internally confident, I don't need to tell everybody about it. I don't need for everybody to know that because the words come out of my mouth about how fantastic and wonderful and great I am. I'm going to have quiet confidence and you're going to see it and you're going to know it because I command respect, right? Not demand respect. That's a separate discussion, but I command respect. I carry myself in such a way that there's confidence that's obvious, right? These folks have a really fragile ego. And so the confidence, the arrogance, the cockiness on the outside is a compensation for that ego. So that's the first thing to know. You're dealing with people who likely have trauma in their past as well. Not always, but likely. And they've developed this ego compensation method to help them not get lost in that, to help them rise above it, so they think. So what happens is a lot of times that sort of confidence and presence is very attractive to someone with BPD. They want someone who is intense like they are. They're drawn to that intensity. And so there's that connection. The other thing is people with NPD tend to be more logical and rational thinking. Their thinking isn't always rational, but they tend to be more logical and rational oriented and not necessarily emotionally oriented. So the person with NPD then can serve as the emotional container for the relationship. So the person with BPD is drawn to that person who can contain their emotion. The third piece would be the narcissist loves the ego strokes they get from this person doting on them and tripping over themselves to be with them or make them happy. It strokes that fragile ego. So there's that draw as well. So that's the gist of why people with BPD often end up with people with NPD. So in terms of treating it, that's where it gets really tricky.
Okay.
NPD, full-blown narcissistic personality disorder, is very difficult, if not impossible, to treat. Now, I believe everyone can change if they want to. The
Right.
trick is people with NPD don't necessarily have that awareness. So people with narcissistic features or traits, I've seen them heal and get better. But people with full-blown NPD are not going to show up in a therapist's office most of the time. That's where it gets tricky.
Let me. You got a question you want to ask?
No, what she says is it makes sense. I never thought about that, but it makes perfect sense.
Let's go deeper. Let's go deeper. I'm talking about I'm being transparent here. I share with you my journey down that road with um, the late Dr. Lawler, who intervened during my child custody battle, and we did a PPI, which I'll let you talk about a PPI. But the dangerous side of that, maybe you can help me understand this. I talked to my therapist about it, but when these three things result in reactive personality actions where the person who has all of these chemical or emotional imbalances, revenge becomes scorn women battered syndrome. And narcissistic personality, all these simple things resulted in I'm gonna do whatever to cripple, to hurt the whole 9 yards. I wasn't even prepared for what I was about to go through. And it 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 emotionally drained me mentally, physically. I saw the effect that it did on my child, but I was talking to Jessica about this, and you can share some light on this. It was really saddened because when you're diagnosed with these things and you don't realize you have them, you don't give a fuck who you hurt along that pathway to prove a point that you created in your mind that when I walked away from the relationship, the narcissistic side was I would get you back. I would get you back in my life at whatever cost. It was scary. What's your take on that? And have you witnessed these kind of things with your practice as it relates to fix the freaking marriage?
Well, I think that people with narcissistic or borderline personality disorder, because of immaturity, they very often will be people who seek revenge. So, I mean, that's just the first thing, talking about these two personalities. A lot of times there is revenge seeking, and it just comes from immaturity, right? If I'm mature and grounded and well rounded, I don't need to seek revenge on some fool who hurt me. I'm not going to keep living in that and hurt myself further. This person already damaged me. They damaged my past. I'm not going to let them damage my future. Right. So, but that takes a certain level of maturity. And, this is so timely. I'm actually getting ready to publish a book on betrayal and overcoming betrayal because I suffered a pretty significant professional betrayal a couple weeks ago. And it's so hard to get past that and not seek revenge. But it's that maturity piece that is really pivotal.
And I thank you for coming onto the show. And it's funny when very few people know my story. You know it, my therapists know it, and I'm still trying to heal. The first thing I had to do was understand what I was dealing with, have compassion and empathy for it, and realize, like you said, they never gonna recognize they have it, even when they've been tested by one of the greatest people in their field, Dr. Lawler, the late Dr. Lawler. But um, what do you tell somebody who, like you said, those individuals that have these things, they're not going to go to therapy. They're going to be they're going to first thing say, "That's not me. That's not me." What do you tell the partner who's having to deal with this kind of stuff? He or she should he fix the freaking marriage, or should he or she walk away?
Well, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think it's a personal decision. Either they decide if they want to go through that big haul that she said with them because their values and the love for that person is beyond that, or they decide I don't want to have to deal with this. I don't want to have to spend the rest of my life with this. I don't need this person, and they leave.
What do you think, Doc?
Yeah, ultimately, it is a very personal decision for sure. I agree. I always tell people, look, if you're going to end a relationship, you want to know that you've done everything you can, short of selling your soul, to try and make the relationship work. So don't just wing it on your own. Okay, we're all broken. So get some help. Get some, dig into some intensive therapy, preferably therapy that has a psychodynamic approach, which means we're digging into the past and pulling up all of that junk, helping you get through that, compartmentalize it differently so it doesn't drive your thinking. And then your partner does the same thing, and then you do marital therapy as well. Now, some people will try a therapist and they don't like them. One or both of the partners don't like them, and then they're like, "Well, we tried. That's it."
I've
No,
heard
that's not
that
really trying.
so many times. I've seen and heard that many times. And that's the tricky part because it takes time for you to sometimes, I saw situations where you found the right therapist for you right there the first time, but it's not the common thing. And when you don't have that, then you don't want to start all over again with somebody else. Oh no, I have to start from scratch because they don't know me yet. They don't know. So people end up giving up, or they do part of it and then they stop because, in their own understanding of it, limited thinking, they just decide to say, "Oh, it's enough. I don't need to do this anymore. I learned this and this, and that's good enough," and they go with that.
But I'm a do a follow up on that, and I'm gonna ask the doctor this question: how do you really find a good therapist? And let me explain where I'm going with this. You're right. The first therapist I went to when I was in that relationship clearly said, walk away. But I agree with what you said. I'm trying to invest in the relationship. I go to the next therapist. He was great. Dr. Ross Santa Maria. I shared his name before. Great therapist. Um, but what I learned from that therapy session was who I was dealing with, blah, blah, blah. We would do individual, then we would do couples. He would do his notes. Then I met Steve Cooper, who transformed my way of thinking by understanding trauma that everybody goes to. And I say, okay, I should have the option to learn if I want to I would be like, I'm not validating somebody every day. He was like, Dre, this is their trauma. This is what you have to do to help them. You got to put yourself in their shoes, so to speak. So with that said, I think a lot of people, to go back to what you said, go through a lot of different therapists because they want the therapist to agree with everything he or she is saying. My viewpoint was I don't want a therapist to agree with what I'm saying. I want to know that you understand where I'm coming from and not agree. How does a person really navigate into finding the appropriate therapist for he or she as a couple or individual?
So that's a challenging question because different people are looking for different things. Like you said, like some people want someone who's going to agree with them. The the more mature people don't want someone who's going to agree with them. I mean, if they're right, yes, but if there are things they need to work on, they want somebody to call that out.
Right.
So I think just going into therapy and the search for a therapist with that awareness that the first therapist may not be your person, or the second, or the third. I mean, I've got people who landed on me. I was number 7, 8, 9, 5. And God bless them, they just kept trying, and then we get somewhere. But I think it's a couple things come to mind. So it's kind of something that you can sense when you're in the room with someone or virtually with someone, when you're meeting with someone. Is do you feel like they understand you? First of all, do you feel like they're listening?
Right.
I guess even before that, do you feel like they know what they're talking about? Did you vet them? Did you go on their website? Did you listen to their podcast? Did you look at their book or look at their whatever, follow their social media? What are they doing on TikTok, Instagram, whatever? You got to really vet them. And there's so many ways to do that right now. I mean, I'm out there in so many ways. There's no reason you can't vet me thoroughly,
It's
right?
so,
Look at
it's
my
so funny
reviews
you said
online,
that.
whatever.
It's so funny you said that. Not to cut you off, but to stay on track what you're saying. I interviewed my therapist.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I interviewed him. I asked him questions. I wanted to know. He didn't have to tell me everything about him, but I wanted to know that he knew what I was about to go through. Are you married? I asked him questions because I believe in order to get mentally healthy, you also got to make sure that the person, like you said, that you're dealing with, doctors, therapists, whatever, can relate to you, that they at least walk the path that you walk. You can't relate to me if you never been around my environment. You can't relate to me if you don't know nothing I went through. So I agree. I was just saying I agree with everything you were saying.
Yeah, yeah. So definitely vet the person going in. And then once you get there, assuming you've done a good job at vetting them and you've seen them, talk about many things before and you kind of have a feel for what they do, if you're drawn to them, get your session scheduled. And then I always tell people, give it 3 sessions at a minimum, because three is a pattern. So give it 3 sessions with that person to see if you're going to connect. You also want to make sure that you're getting somewhere. So my intake process is very structured so that people can feel like, okay, we're getting somewhere, we're accomplishing some things. We're going to do that deep dive into my family of origin, and I'm going to see what my skeletons are, so to speak. So I like that sort of structure. It gives people, when they come into therapy, are anxious, right? For good reason. They're fearful. What are they going to hear? What are they going to find out? What's going to be revealed? Whatever their reasons. So if you create that structure and predictability with lots of direct questions and stuff like that, while still honoring what they're there for, but you got to gather that history. So if that structure is there, sometimes that puts people's minds at ease. So I think that helps. The other thing is evaluating after each of those 3 session, the trial period, if you will, do an after action review. I have this on my training platform. It's a free form that you can get. It's an after action review of the session. So how did it go? What did you feel listened to? What do you feel you accomplished? What are your agenda items for next time? Like, evaluate the session as objectively as you can afterwards and see if you're really connecting with this person. I tell people, look, I'm in the intake, I'm interviewing you. You're also interviewing me. There's nothing that says this is going to work. You get to decide if you want to work with me, and vice versa.
Let me ask you a question. You got a question you want to ask?
No, those are great tips because really, most of the people just open or go online to their insurance page and see which therapist it is. Or in my case, I go to Google and look at the reviews, and that's all the screening that I do. So thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I must do an in-depth screening then. So my last question before we get ready to wrap up. I wish I knew this a long time ago. And I kind of like agree with my thought on this process. I think everyone should have to take a PPI prior to getting married, not relationship wise, but a PPI before you get married. Could you explain, you know what a PPI is? Can you go a little bit deeper into a PPI, what it is? And more importantly, how do you think that will relate before you actually get into the marriage so you don't have to worry about fixing the freaking marriage?
Yeah. So you said PPI. Are you talking about the MMPI, the big personality
Yeah,
the big personality?
the 5 hour, 3 to 5 hour questionnaire.
Yeah, it's the MMPI, Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, and I
That's it.
think we're on the second edition of that.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's 567 yes or no questions.
correct.
It's a really informative test. I haven't seen it in a long time, but we all had to take one in graduate school so that we knew what it was like. And man, it just goes on forever.
Oh my God,
But
tell me about it. What is it? three
it's
hours,
long.
5 hours?
But there are others. There's the PAI, the Personality Assessment Inventory, much shorter, gives you a lot of good information too. So, yeah, if you're willing to go through a personality inventory like that, man, it is so informative because this is not someone's opinion. This test, the MMPI especially, I mean, we're talking thousands and thousands, maybe even millions probably at this point of people have gone through that test and are part of the data that drives the interpretation of the test. So it's incredibly informative. It's not something you can find online. You're going to have to pay for it through a provider,
Yeah,
but it's
it was
hugely
pretty expensive.
informative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your take on that though? My question is, I I I've taken it. I was truly blown away. I mean, But I was more blown away. This is just gonna trip you out. I should share this with you. I was more blown away with the person that was diagnosed with all those things was trying to beat the test. And it showed it. He
Yes.
was trying to beat the test. And I was like, get the hell out of here. And I was like, and it's so let's go back to the question. Do you think it should be
Yeah.
implemented in a premarital situation? That way you can at least
Know what you're walking into.
know what you're walking into.
Well, I told you last time, I believe that there should be an evaluation and premarital process that has to occur before a marriage license is given.
Mhm.
And there will be people who try to get around that. They'll do a civil ceremony or whatever these other things are called, commitment ceremony, whatever. But I think that you should go into relationships with your eyes wide open. And so knowing where your partner is coming from, whether that's they're willing to do some, psychological testing or just the premarital counseling, absolutely. I would love for it to be a requirement. I don't know that it ever will be, but I would love for that to be a requirement. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just investing in your relationship and your future and your happiness, the rest of your life possibly.
Mm, I
Well,
strongly.
yeah, I mean these test batteries can be really expensive, but you know what? Divorce is a whole lot more expensive.
Oh yeah.
So investing, yes, is a great idea.
That was the greatest amount of I had to I took it once and I was when I talked to Dr. Lawler about it, I was blown away. I was like, why didn't I know about this when I went to school, for exercise science? Why did I know this? But it was so detailed, even though the questions was redundant over and over again, I was like, wow, but it clearly told me who I was. I mean, it was spot on spot. And I was like, wow, this should be implemented in every facet of a relationship. Because had I known what I was dealing with, I might have, like you said, give me a choice. It's not saying to walk away from the relationship, but now maybe you can give me the tools to deal with it, and can it be dealt with?
Yeah, it's just empowerment.
Yeah, exactly.
So before we wrap up, Doc, I want to once again say thank you for taking the time to come on and once again give us the second part of Fix the Freaking Marriage. But tell the viewers what you got going on now. What's in store for you next?
So I've got a lot of irons in the fire right now that have mostly happened since you and I talked. So the big thing is the second book about getting on with your freaking life. That's kind of rolling in the background, and I work on that when I can. I just published a book called "You're Not Crazy: The Perimenopause Survival Guide" because that's my season. So that just went live. It's an ebook, and I'm waiting for audiobook approval. So that's out there on Amazon. And then the Betrayal book I'm editing this week, hoping to get the pre-sales going on that soon. I've been more active on the podcast, so I'm posting every week there, The Psych with a Mic. You can find me on Instagram under the same handle, The Psych with a Mic. I'm on TikTok, it's Shrink Think with Dr. Jen, and then on Facebook under my name. But yeah, a lot of things in the works, working with my marketing team to get some more things out there. It's fun, it's exciting.
And I believe you can ready to do some work with the iambeast Network. We'll keep that under wraps later. You got a lot of things.
Okay. Okay.
you, you got a lot of things going on. I want to thank my celebrity co-host Jessica for coming onto the show and promoting her new podcast. Tell us a little bit about your podcast once again before we wrap up.
Sure. It's a podcast that helps you transform your life inside out into a life you truly love, like I'm loving life right now.
What's the name of the podcast?
Jessica Javins Talk.
Doc, before we wrap up, we've already shared how the viewers can reach out to you. Give us that information one more time.
So Jennifer Bellingrodt on Facebook, The Psych with a Mic is my Instagram and my podcast, or Shrink Think with Dr. Jen is where I'm on TikTok. That's where the most activity occurs, is on TikTok, actually.
Thank you so much for taking the time out to come on the show and educate
Oh,
us.
my pleasure.
Love it. Want you to come back anytime you want to. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another exciting episode of the Andre The Beast
Beast
Crayton
Crayton.
Show.